There are so many great fly tyers that have shaped my tying and my fly preferences, and John Barr is one of them. And his Copper John is a must-have pattern anywhere you go fishing, rivers or lakes. Hello everyone, I'm Phil Rowley and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you ever come down to Argentina with me, you're going to want a little red or rojo in your fly box. And one of the best flies to have in the color red is John Barr's Copper John. Let me show you how I tie the version I use whenever I go down to chase those giant rainbow on Lago Strobel, better known to many as Jurassic Lake. So let's tie the rubber-legged Copper John. Red one. One of my favorite flies, nymph flies, when I'm in Argentina. So I'm actually going to build up an underbody first on the front half of the fly using some 3/0 Uni-Stretch. For the hook, it's a Daiichi 1760 number 10. And for the bead, it's a 1/8 3.2 millimeter tungsten bead. So we're just going to start this Uni-Stretch just like tying thread. Wind that down. And this is just simply to avoid having to use excess amounts of tying thread to build up the underbody. So only about halfway down, come back up. And just like regular tying thread, you can spin this counterclockwise to flatten the wraps. Because a smooth underbody is key to forming a nice smooth wire body, and just helps build up in the front portion of the fly. Again, we don't have to use excessive thread bulk. And that should be good. And then all I'm going to do is tie this off, and now we're going to attach our tying thread, which are Semperfli Nano Silk. Come in right behind the bead, get that thread started. Making sure those two bobbins don't get intertwined. And then we'll secure the stretch floss down, push the other bobbin out of the way. We'll get on with tying our fly. So we got that nice underbody built up. You could always use lead wire as well if you wanted to build up the underbody in the front, but I like using the Uni-Floss because that tungsten bead weighs a fair bit as it is. And I fish this fly in a Stillwater environment most often. So we've got our thread down to the the back of the barb. And then we're going to tie in some Goose Biots in red. So we're going to take 2 Goose Biots from, going to grab them. Get my scissors in there. So I've taken those 2 Biots, repositioned them so they're back to back and they run away from each other. Using the hook point to divide them, I'm going to hold them in place so they're about a half a shank length long. And just place a couple of wraps to bind them in place. And then position them from there. Just like so. So I've got that nice splayed signature tail of a Copper John. And then we'll just come forward and secure the butts of those Goose Biots up and along. And when I get near the rear of that Uni-Floss, or stretch floss rather, underbody, I'll just trim them off. So I've got a nice smooth underbody all the way along from the base of the tail up to the thorax area. I'm going to tie in the medium red wire that I'm going to use for the body, at the thorax area and secure it down the near side of the shank all the way to the base of the tail. Bring the tying thread forward a little bit, and I get that first wrap in right at the base of the tail. Next wrap right in front of it. And again, that smooth underbody is key. And as I get up near the thread, I'm just winding the wire directly behind the thread and essentially walking that thread forward, and the thread helps push the wire wraps tight against each other. And I can also look because that's what some of you might be wondering, well, why don't you use red thread? And I certainly could, but I like the black because if I have a spacing between my wire, I can see it. And I know, okay, I'm going to unravel it and do a better job of getting those wire wraps next to each other. So we're just going to wind that right up. I can overwind it a little bit. I'm going to take this right up to where the thorax is going to start. Tie it off. And just secure that all the way up. It's going to help build up additional bulk in the thorax area. We're going to be good. Okay, so the body didn't turn out too bad. So let's build the thorax area, starting with the wing case. So the wing case is going to have a layer of mirror tinsel over top of one of my favorite shellback or wing case materials, and that's dark reddish brown stretch flex. You could also use black stretch flex or scudback, or as John Barr did with the original Copper John, I believe it was black thin skin. I'll lay this mirror tinsel on the top of the shank, just behind the bead, lifting up on it and secure it back. I'm going back onto that wire body slightly, a couple of wraps. And that's on top. Then we're going to take our stretch flex material, bring the thread forward, and like we did with the mirror tinsel, lay that on top of the shank, just behind the bead, and secure it back onto the body, back where you tied the mirror tinsel. Looks good. For the thorax, I'm going to use some Peacock Herl. Could use Peacock dubbing as well, a nice dub or something like that, but it's tough to beat natural Peacock Herl. I'm going to take that Peacock Herl, align it by the tips, but then trim the very brittle portion of the tips off and secure that Peacock Herl down to the base of the wing case. Come forward to about the midpoint. And we're going to tie in our legs, which we're not going to use rubber legs as the pattern name suggests. You certainly could, but I really like using these Sexi-Floss legs in red for my legs, so I'm going to tie in a pair on each side. So I've just taken a length, doubled it a little bit, cut it in half, and I've got two lengths. I'm just going to come in and hold that on top. Line that in place like so. Grab the near set and pull them down to the side. And then take the far set and wind them down the side like so. And then we're just going to secure them a bit in the midpoint. And then I'm going to work my thread forward to the rear of the bead. And to keep these legs under control, I'm just going to put a wrap over them, grab my Peacock Herl, start winding them forward, and then undo the wraps as I get to the midpoint. Wind them forward. Going to go within about a wrap of the bead. Then I'm going to pull the front legs back out of the way. and get at least one wrap of Peacock Herl between the legs, the front pair of legs, and the rear of the bead, like so. Come up and just sort of work my thread through. Tie off the Peacock Herl. Then we're going to pull our stretch flex over the top to form the wing case. Again, not too aggressively. It's a stretchy material. We just want to pull it over firmly because I don't want it to spring out when we trim it off. So we've got that tied in place. We'll lift it up, trim. And then I'm going to pull over the red mirror tinsel right over the back. Like so, trying to make sure it's centered down the back. I don't quite like how that's behaving. That's better. I can wiggle on it a bit. It's pretty well going down Main Street. A couple of wraps over the top. A few wraps in front. And then we will find our whip finisher, and then we'll pull down and form a whip finish right behind the bead. Come up, and then we're going to trim our rear legs. I like them a little longer, so almost even with the, again, gather them, but I'm not stretching on them, and they're almost as long as the tail. And then I can use those two legs as a template for the front legs by simply gathering all the legs now and standing them up and trimming the front legs so they're as long as the rear legs. So this thing's really going to jiggle and twitch when you pull it through the water. And now we want to add a little protective coat onto the back. We're going to use that by using a little Solares thick hard formula. So I've taken a little of the thick hard formula and I've put it on a post-it note, and then I'm going to use a dubbing needle or a bodkin here. So I like to do it. I just find I have much better control putting it on with a dubbing needle than squeezing it directly from the bottle. And I'm just going to let that settle. Need to put some on the far side of that wing case a little bit more. And just let gravity sort of settle that down. Happy with how that's positioned. Maybe a little bit more just behind the bead and just distribute it onto the bead. There we go. And just let it settle for a second. That looks not bad. And find our curing light. And cure Solares. There you have it, the finished rubber leg, perhaps more sexy leg, red sexy leg copper john. They love red flies in Argentina. And this one you want to make sure you have in your box if you ever come down to Argentina with me. Chase those giant rainbows.